Thanks, Doug, for joining us today. We are here to talk about how to create engaging news, online news, in an era of not very simple, I mean, fake news, I'm sure was mentioned countless times already, content fatigue, content overload, Facebook changing its algorithm every, 3 seconds. There's a lot going on, and this is exactly what Playbuzz is dealing with on a daily basis. We work with some of the biggest news publishers in the world using our storytelling platform to create news that is more engaging, that engages the audience, that keeps them active, that creates interaction. And companies like the BBC, HuffPost, Sky News, and ABC. And we'd love to hear a little bit more from Doug on how to create engaging news in a very interesting time. And since I mentioned the Facebook algorithm, I think that would be a great place to start. So obviously, Facebook has kind of told the world we're not really into news anymore. That's not what they're interested in. And it really changes how people consume news, because we know that up until recently, about 45% of Americans testified that they consume their news mostly through Facebook. So what does ABC News do in order to still reach your audience and find them when Facebook doesn't want to show them content anymore?
Sure. Hey everyone, how's it going today? Another slow news day here in the States. Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I think, I don't know, I might take a little issue with what you said about Facebook saying they're not interested in news. I think Facebook has clearly said they're not interested in fake news, which you mentioned, and I think they're getting very serious about that this year, as are many of the platform companies that we work with at ABC. So I think we feel personally like we're in a very good position. We're a trusted brand. We're an authoritative brand. This is, I think, our 70th year publishing news on television, the radio, and the internet, obviously, more recently. So I think with regard to Facebook specifically, I think they're looking for news that is authoritative, trustworthy, engaging, which we'll of course talk about. And I think if you as a publisher or somebody who is creating news content, I think if you can keep those three aspects in mind, I think you might be surprised by how little you'll be impacted by the new Facebook algorithm change. We're not seeing a big change there over the last couple months. Like everybody, we've seen some change. But yeah, I think we love working with Facebook. We think, as you said, I mean, that 45% number is a huge one. Yep. We, as a distributed publisher, will go where our audience is, and so we'll continue to work with Facebook very closely, while putting a real emphasis on the fact that we are an authoritative source. We don't traffic in fake news, or it's all about the facts and being very straightforward with us. So yeah, I think it actually might help us in the long run.
Interesting. And so you're right that Facebook keeps saying, we want to change the fake news situation, but then they're saying we're prioritizing content that's shared by your friends and not by authoritative sources like news sites. And I mean, does that support fake news, or does it help avoid it?
No, that's a really interesting question. I think that again is that makes it incumbent on us to create news that people on Facebook users on Facebook will want to share. Of course, Playbuzz helps us, and like you said, many publishers with that. I think it's changing the way we have to think about the formats of news. I think that the old days of just reporting, writing a couple paragraphs and publishing it out through a traditional CMS are probably gone or are dying quickly. I think we're constantly looking at new formats and new ways to encourage users to have a conversation with their friends and family about news, to learn something new, and so then therefore share that news, to be inspired. I think there are a lot of tactics still we as big publishers can take to encourage sharing on these social platforms.
So what specifically can you tell us about product innovation at ABC News that's helping you avoid this, content overload, really standing out from the crowd?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to follow the NBA panel that was just here, the guys that were just talking about VR. I think VR is an example of one of many of ways to innovate in the news space. I think they mentioned how cool it would be to through VR be able to sit courtside and watch LeBron up close and personal without having to spend thousands of dollars to actually physically sit courtside. I think in the news space, we've been looking at VR and AR, for example, as ways to bring users in a similar manner to places that they might not otherwise be able to get to. Actually, one of our first VR initiatives at ABC News a few years ago was bringing a VR camera into North Korea to a military parade that Kim Jong-un was overseeing. And I think that's something we hear about North Korea in the news every day. It's obviously top of a lot of people's minds, but North Korea is kind of a mystery, I think, to most people. It's such a closed country. So being able to actually put on a VR headset and go there and watch a military parade or be toured through the country, see what a North Korean hotel looks like. Those are things I think that's still news, right? I mean, we're connecting this story about North Korea with this experiential format like North Korea. I think that's something we're spending a lot of time thinking about. I think also, for example, mentioning that today is a busy news day, the other interesting thing in news specifically versus entertainment perhaps is that a lot of the content that we're publishing is somewhat commoditized. So everybody in this room now probably knows that Rex Tillerson is no longer the Secretary of State of the United States. So ABC News reporting that isn't going to really tell you anything different than what you might get from CNN or the New York Times or any of our competitors. So what we as a product and technology organization have to do is think of ways to differentiate our coverage of that commodity information, using that commodity information. So again, whether it's using a platform like Playbuzz to make the story more engaging and interactive, whether it's focusing on hard tech challenges like just making our sites load faster, video more high quality, distributing to new video platforms. There are lots of tactics you can take. Plenty to fill up an entire session here today, but that's sort of as the product and tech leader of ABC, that's where I fit in, is try to figure out how to create these new experiences that can differentiate us from our competitors.
And how do you respond to the rise of voice assistants, and everybody's obsessed with them? How does ABC News optimize for? Yeah,
I think again, I mentioned with Facebook following the audience. I think it's been really interesting to see the rise of the Alexa platform and Google Home and now HomePod, and I think there's many other big tech companies have announced initiatives in the space. I think it's exciting. I think news is part of everybody's day. When you wake up in the morning, probably most of you check your phone to see if something happened overnight that you want to hear about or you want to be informed about, so you can go to work or school or just have a conversation with your family and make sure that you're informed. So I think voice platforms are just another way that we see people waking up in the morning and asking what happened overnight, tell me the news, at night when they come home from work or school, wanting to get a quick update from their voice assistant in their kitchen or living room. So yeah, I think we've experimented with Alexa and Google Home. Plenty more to come this year, but it's an exciting platform. I think voice is here to stay for sure.
I've actually started consuming all my morning news through podcasts, so different type of voice, but also very effective. Yep. Yeah. Maybe we can go back to our poll and see what the audience voted on our news prediction for 2018. I'm curious. All right, so everybody thinks that readers will stop depending on Facebook for news. What do you think, Doug?
That's interesting. I mean, I think we have seen much more. We've seen a lot more search engagement with news over the last year or so, especially on phones. I think the AMP platform has been a big success for us and for Google and many publishers. We also have seen we've seen huge growth in the OTT platforms like Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV. We think those are really interesting platforms for news consumption. Everybody talks about Netflix and Hulu and Amazon there, but I think people, these devices are connected to their TVs or in many cases in their TVs, and they're using them to consume news. And so I think that poll is probably right on. I think people will still get their news from Facebook, but it is becoming a more distributed world, and we're excited about all the new platforms that are out there.
We're excited as well. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.